love the church. I grew up in the church. In fact, it was reported to me that I took my first steps in learning how to walk in Harrisville United Methodist Church, my home church in a small town of Harrisville in western Pennsylvania. I grew up in Sunday school in the church, youth group, going to church camp, singing in the church choir, you name it. I was probably a part of it in the church growing up. I got in trouble for running around the sanctuary as a child, the whole 9 yards, and I was not a pastor's kid growing up. My mom is now a second career pastor, but at the time, that was not the case. But sometimes I felt like I was at the church more than the pastor's kids were, because it seemed like every time the church was open, we were there in the church. And I still remember to this day laying on the wooden pews in Harrisville United Methodist Church, sometimes when my parents maybe were there for an evening meeting, and I feel like I could just feel the presence of God in a tangible way. And maybe some of you can relate to this. You grew up in the church. You love the church. The church has shaped you into who you are today. It's been an important part of your calling and ministry journey. And some of you love the church. But maybe some of you, this isn't your story. Maybe you didn't grow up in the church. Maybe you tried church later on in life. Maybe actually, if you're honest, you've had some disappointment or disillusionment with the church. Maybe you tried the church out because you heard about this unconditional love and grace of God, this healing and community that's possible. And then you showed up and you found judgment or criticism or hypocrisy. And maybe the church caused more harm in your life than healing. And so I don't always do this, but I'm actually curious. I want to see a show of hands this morning. How many of you did grow up in the church? Show of hands. All right, quite a few of us. Anyone not really grew up in the church, tried it more later in adult life? Yes, thank you. Appreciate their honesty with that. Great. How many of you love the church? You're big fans? Okay, great. How many of you are honest? You've had some harm done to you from the church? Yes, thank you for your honesty, right? Both can be true. And so regardless of what your experience with church is today, we're all here in this church along the Carlisle Pike trying to figure out how to be a family of God together. And I want to talk a little bit more this week and over the next couple of weeks about what has been the trouble in the church of helping all people, especially young people, follow Jesus? And so in full disclosure, some of you know this, my husband, Chris, who's also a pastor, happened to co-author a book that was published in January titled Followers Under 40. And so we're going to look a little bit this week and over the next couple of weeks about what happened. How did so many young people leave the church? How come there are often entire generations largely missing from the church today? And so whether or not you are under the age of 40, this series applies to us because it's important for us to think about how are we going to be a faith community into the future? What does faith look like? How is it relevant, especially for young people today? How can we be a church not just for the most chronologically mature saints among us, but also for the youngest believers as well? And so I love when I get to stand up here and chat with you all on a Sunday morning and I get to look straight back and I can see back towards the nursery. And it brings me such great joy that I know there's Lincoln and there's Lydia and Alan, sometimes Sophie back there learning about Jesus just like we are in this space together. And I know it's working because Lydia will come home and tell me stories that she learns during her time back there, right? But why this is important to me is because I want Hope Church and I want the church to be around for Lydia and for her children and for her children. That I am concerned about the state of the church in America, that I want the church that I grew up and love to still be thriving in an existence for my daughter and for her children and for her children, for all the generations that will come after us. And I think that's why this is so important, is how can we figure out how to be church together? And so we're going to talk about three main questions today. First, what is the church really? What do we mean when we even talk about the church? The second is, how has the church got it wrong? How have we lost entire generations from the church? And then lastly, what kind of church is God calling us to be here on the Carlisle Pike at Hope Church? So let's start. What is the church really? When we talk about the church, when we use that term, right, different images or thoughts come to mind, right? If I say, what is the church? Sometimes we think it's a building or a sanctuary or an institution or an organization or a denomination or a program, right? These are some ideas or words that come to mind when we say, what is the church? But really, there's this beautiful verse in Matthew 16 that helps us understand what Jesus meant when he was talking about the church. He says, and I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. The Greek word here that we translate as church is ekklesia, which literally means called out ones. In the Greco-Roman world, an ekklesia was like an assembly of people called out for a specific purpose. And that's what the church is. The church is not a building or an institution. The church is the people, right? You've definitely probably heard that before. The church is the people. We are a called out ones to look different from the world, to live out following Jesus. So our mission as the ekklesia is not defined by our four walls, but our mission is defined in following Jesus, of bringing hope to despair, of bringing healing to brokenness, light to darkness, love to a world that desperately needs us. This is what we are called out to do in following Jesus. And so I want to look a little more closely at this verse and in its context. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 16, beginning in verse 13. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." Jesus said to them, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it." That in this passage, Jesus took his disciples to the district of Caesarea Philippi. This is a jaunt for the disciples. It's a 2-day journey north from the Sea of Galilee. It was an intentional choice for Jesus to take his disciples to Caesarea Philippi. And Caesarea Philippi was deep in Roman territory. It was known for idol worship and was a spiritually dark place. In fact, if any of you are watching The Chosen, there's a scene of this, of Jesus taking his disciples to Caesarea Philippi that gives you kind of a picture of this spiritually dark place where idol worship is going on all over the place. And yet this is the setting that Jesus chooses to ask his disciples, "Who do people say I am?" And Peter gets it right. He says, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And almost as like a reward to Peter getting the question right, Jesus says to Peter, "Yes, and you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it." This is a lot going on in this powerful statement of Jesus, because the good Jewish followers of Jesus would have known that the temple in Jerusalem is built upon a rock. But Jesus is not building a new temple. He's not building a new religious system. He's building a new community, an ekklesia, a called out group of people to continue his mission in the world. And if you notice, gates are defensive in nature, right? They're designed to help keep people out or block things in. But the church is always designed to be offensive in nature. That the church is designed to actually break gates of oppression and sin and injustice in the world, that we are called to be a movement that will not be stopped, that even the gates of hell will never box in or stop the work of the church, that this is a transformative movement that we are called and get to be a part of. And in fact, this movement that Jesus begins really takes off in the book of Acts. And so in Acts chapter 2, we see this about this new ecclesia, this called out group of people. This is what they're about. This is what they're doing. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, and to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. We see the church here as being a transformative, life-giving, radical community where people are gathering together in this radical spirit of generosity, and their lives are being transformed. And this shows us that the church is not just a place we go to. A church is not just a service we attend. It's a movement we are a part of. So look at your neighbor and say, "We are the church." Look at your other neighbor and say, "We are the church." All right, yeah, we need a little more enthusiasm this morning for this movement. I don't know about this, if you believe that or not. Okay, but anyway, so we are part of this transformative, life-changing movement in the world as this called-out group of people. But here's my question. What happened? Where did the church go wrong? I think one of the first things that happened of how the church lost our way from being this life-giving, transformative movement in the world is we stopped being relevant. If you look back over your lifetime, I don't need to tell you how much the world has changed just in your lifetime, right? And many times the church failed to keep up with the changes of the world around it. It's definitely not shocking for me to say that church attendance in America is shrinking and aging. And I want to share a couple statistics with you this morning. 42% of Protestant congregations say that over half of their members are over the age of 65. 86% of Americans live in large cities, but only 28% of churches are located in large cities. The median age of pastor in America today is 57. And this, I think, is the most sobering statistic. In the last 25 years, 40 million people have left the church. 40 million people. And I want to pause here for a moment because, friends, this is not just a little shift. This is a significant shift in the life of the church. I'd say one of the most significant shifts in religious history of the United States. In fact, probably historians years from now will write about this time in which we are living, in which 40 million people have left the church. And of course, all these statistics are not just numbers. They represent actual real people that have left the church over harm or disappointment, or their parents stopped going and so the children didn't go, and we keep wondering, hey, maybe they'll come back when they have kids or their kids get older, but it doesn't seem to be happening. And I think what's happened is we've lost many from entire generations from the church in the United States. We've lost many millennials born from 1980 to 1996, I fall in this category, who desire authentic, inclusive, socially engaged church, and we haven't always seen that. And so when we haven't seen the church live up to some of the values that we have, we've decided to walk away or decided the church is no longer relevant for us. We've lost many from the Gen Z generation. This would be Angel's generation, who desire justice and truth and community and meaning and often have deep distrust for institutions. We've lost many from Generation Alpha, which would be Lydia's generation, who are the most diverse and digitally connected generation and who will interact with technology that you and I can't even imagine will be possible someday. We have lost many young people from the church, and I think often what has happened is the church has focused more on our own tradition over transformation. That we've cared more about our own preferences and the way we've always done things than we've cared about being relevant and connecting with young people to be a church for all ages. That we've stopped going to where people are and started saying, hey, you have to come to us. And so I wanted to share a story with you all. As some of you know, a close church to us, Wesley United Methodist Church, recently, not too long ago, voted to close. And when I was at the Good Friday prayer walk on Good Friday, I happened to walk with one of the previous members at Wesley United Methodist Church. And I asked her, I said, hey, if you'd be willing, would you be willing to share with me the story of Wesley, of why you think that church closed? What happened? And she shared with me, she said, Hannah, about over 10 years ago, we had a youth pastor who was really connected with all the families and the young people of the church. But then we got a new senior pastor, and the youth pastor and the senior pastor had a falling out, and the youth pastor left the church, and all of the young people and all the young families left with that youth pastor. And she said we had no more young people left, and we looked around and we didn't know what we were going to do. So we tried everything we could to try to connect with young people on our community through different outreach events and different opportunities, but it just wasn't working. And eventually we just kept going on, and we looked around one Sunday and there was only 15 of us left, and we didn't know how we could keep continuing on. Friends, I tell you that story as a cautionary tale for us at Hope Church because I don't want us to look around 10 years from now and realize there are no young people here. I don't want that to be the same story for us. I want us to be a vibrant, thriving congregation long into the future, a dynamic congregation for Sarah Hankins and for Lincoln, that all are welcome here to be a part of the family of God. I think the second trouble is the church has lost its integrity. I don't have to tell you this, right? You've seen it all over the news. You might have stories of it yourself, of scandal or power abuse or sexual abuse in the church, where sometimes the church has caused incredible harm in people's lives and tried to even cover up those scandals in the process. We've seen pastors fall. We've seen churches fail. We've seen the church act more like a dogmatic machine than the hands and feet of Jesus. And friends, the world is watching what the church is up to. And if especially young people, and I think every people of all age, see that the church has lost its integrity, they don't want to actually be a part of it. And so they walk away. And we have said that we are the called out ones, that we are to follow Jesus. But instead, I think we have become the compromised ones. That instead of looking different from the world, we just look like the world. Or instead of modeling the way of Jesus, we embody greed or power or abuse. And we are not living up to our calling in following Jesus. And great harm, unfortunately, has been done, that we've made faith more about control than about compassion. And so lots of people have left the church because the church has often lost its integrity. And lastly, I would say the church has focused more on membership instead of discipleship. That in the last several years, we've cared a lot about getting people in the doors of the church. Or there's this saying that goes, we care about butts in the seat and bucks in the offering plate, right? And that's important when we think about church vitality, but it's not all that matters. That unfortunately, sometimes the church has put its own survival over spiritual formation. That it hasn't sought to be, how do we actually have people encountering the love of God that are transformed in their life, but it's cared more about its own survival and the institution instead of spiritual formation. That we've forgotten that we follow the resurrected Christ who has defeated the power of sin and death, that we can have real hope and transformation in our lives, that we follow the Prince of Peace, that we follow Jesus, who was such a prophetic voice for the marginalized, the poor, the oppressed, that God always has a heart for the orphan and the widow and for children, that we stand up against all the isms, all sexism and ageism and racism, because we believe that all people are created in the image of God. And I think sometimes we've forgotten our prophetic voice. We've forgotten the transformative power of God, that this is not a time for the church to retreat into comfort, but to continue to be a vibrant, transformative movement in the world. So friends, what church then is God calling us to be here at Hope Church? Well, when it came to Hope, now almost 3 years ago, our leaders got together and we said, this is what we really see. This is why we exist. This is what God is calling us to do, to be a family of God committed to sharing the hope of Christ. And we do this together by growing God's family through fun, authentic, loving relationships. This is what we say we want to do and what we want to be about in the world. This is what we feel God calling us to. And we say we want to be authentic, to be real, to not take ourselves so seriously. We want to be resiliently generous, to give no matter the challenge. We want to be growth-oriented, that there's always room for one more, and diverse, where all are welcome. This is who we are and who we seek and strive to be. And it has been one of my greatest joys to see, as we have lived this out together, this vision and mission and core values come into existence. To see the orbit of our regular people throughout the community that we are connecting with through the egg hunt or through community meals, and for people to come to worship through a part of that, that makes my heart sing as we are sharing Christ's hope in relationship with our community. And so I couldn't be prouder of you as a church and what we have done together and what we will continue to do together. But my question is, I want us to always be in tune with God's Spirit, to open to wherever God is leading us, whatever God is calling us to be, because here's why this matters, friends, is that I want Hope Church to be a vibrant congregation long into the future. For my daughters, Lydia, for her children, that I think often sometimes Hope Church is one of the best kept secrets. I still believe the local church is the hope of the world. And so when we come to such an amazing place like Hope Church, and many of us have found community and belonging here, right? And that's awesome, right? We truly try to be a family of God together. And so it's beautiful when you come and find community and belonging here, but we can't just keep that to ourselves. We have to share that with other people, to invite others into the family of God. Or maybe you came to church looking for comfort, and that's good because we all need peace in our life, but we can't just keep that to ourselves. We need to share that with a world that so desperately needs it. Because the church is one of the only organizations in the world that exists for its members that are not yet a part of it. That we are not to be a social club. We are a missional movement. We are not a cruise ship for the comfortable. We are a rescue ship out helping people that feel drowned by the waves of their life. And so, friends, we are called to be the church, this called out ecclesia, on fire with the Holy Spirit, moving in the world, in step where God is leading us. We are called to be that kind of church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. The question is, are you ready? Are you ready to be that kind of church? Amen.